All right, thank you so much, Steve. And I'm excited to be here today because Steve asked me to talk about two of my big passions, which is around all these technologies, but also around leadership. And just so you know, I was working on a different book when ChatGPT hit the scene in December of 22. And I was working on a book about wisdom. So it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about both of those topics today. So as Steve said, I have been in the space of disruptive transformation for a very long time. And just as an example, I graduated from Harvard Business School in the same month that the World Wide Web was invented. And instead of going into consulting or investment banking, I decided to go join the San Jose Mercury News because I could see that this internet thing was going to be pretty big and that newspapers were probably going to be the first ones impacted. So I ran towards disruption because that's where opportunities are created. And I have the privilege now of having been in the front row of so many of these changes. And why is this moment different? We've all talked about how transformative AI is going to be. And I can tell you, I've seen so many trends go by. And when this hit, I went, this is going to change everything. Again, I saw the internet come along, social media, wrote my first book about that. And I also saw other trends like disruptive technologies and digital transformations and mobile and Web3. None of those have any comparison to this. In fact, one of the first things I did was to sit down and think about all the things that I do on a regular basis to do my job as a thought leader. And I realized that 70% of them were now moot because these technologies could do it. In fact, you could go into ChatGPT and just ask it, be Charlene, and you could get advice from it directly. You don't need me anymore. Or do you? So that was my beginning of the exploration to say, what could this technology do? And today I'll be talking about not only what it does, some of the latest technologies, I'll show you some of the whiz-bang things, but also how is it going to change the way we show up as leaders? Because every transformative technology requires that we transform too as well. So I think you all know this by now. ChatGPT, the other ones like Claude AI, Perplexity, Notebook LLM from Google, so many of these technologies, they do basically 5 things. They create content, and they create this content extremely well. We have, for example, just writing and content. We have audio, video. We have, again, images, and then we also have code. And just to have a little fun, I figured I'd write a little song for all of you using Suno.ai. So this is a little song I wrote. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it is kind of fun. So here we go. We stepped into the unknown. Curiosity leads the way. You can get up and dance if you want. Driven to break the mold. New ideas light up the day. Innovation in our minds. Together we chase the dreams. Forward thinking all the time. I'm living it. We can sing this tonight. Did the future break the walls? Let your vision hear the calls. Together we can stand so tall. Our curiosity will conquer all. I think you get the idea. So that took me literally 5 seconds to make. And here's the thing, that you can think that's pretty cool. It's also very terrifying. My daughter is a professional musician. I don't tell her I do this because she would have my head. She said, Mom, stop playing with this AI stuff. You're just giving it more information that's going to hurt people like me. So this is the conundrum, right? So how do we think about these technologies? So I'm going to show you one other thing. So this is my digital avatar. This was made completely from a script that I wrote. I gave to my team, and they made this. And the idea is that at some point, I don't need to get on a plane necessarily and fly someplace to give a speech. It could do it for me, and in any language. I don't have to sit down and record every single video. I could have my avatar do it and also personalize every single course to the learning needs of each person. So I'm going to show you my avatar.
Hi there. I'm Charlene's human digital twin, but you can call me your future assistant extraordinaire. My job? to help make life easier and way more fun. While I can easily create presentations, I can also customize training for each employee based on their unique needs, development plan, or even how they like to learn. Oh, and did I mention? I speak over 70 languages. For example, puedo hablar 23 dialectos diferentes de español, or मैं आपके लिए शुद्ध हिंदी बोल सकती हूँ. And best of all, 我父母一直希望我能说普通话. Pretty cool, right? While Charlene still got me beat on the dance floor, the technology keeps getting better, and the possibilities are endless, limited only by our imaginations.
So how many thought that was pretty cool? Show of hands? Okay. Honestly, how many thought that was kind of scary? Right. So we're entering this stage now where it's almost, it's not me, obviously, but it's getting there. And this is the worst avatar I'm going to ever have. That avatar is under lock and key. Only I control it. And I'm going to use it in a way to build relationships with the people I want to reach out to and influence and impact. And the problem here is that at some point, we reach into the uncanny valley. This is where the technology is becoming so human-like, but there's just something a little bit wrong with it that makes us feel like, oh, that's not quite right. And until it's not quite right, we don't trust it. So our belief in AI, because of hallucinations or because of things not looking quite right or sounding quite right, our belief and comfort with it really dips. And the interesting thing right now is, how will we cross this valley? What does that bridging look like? And how will we maintain our focus on the future, what this technology can do, and not be distracted by this valley? And I believe that the way to do this is for us to understand the capabilities of generative AI, but also understand its limitations. For example, I do believe that generative AI is absolutely intelligent. There's no doubt about it. It has the entire world's knowledge inside of its grasp, but it's not wise. But it can make us wiser, but only if we know how to use it. And the vast majority of people think, well, how do we become wiser? How can this technology, isn't wisdom just something you learn over time, right? Well, my definition of wisdom, and this is from a lot of other people too as well, is that it is this ability to use the knowledge and your experience to make good decisions. And what is it that leaders do day in and day out, constantly, all the time? It is they make good decisions. And you can be a wise person, yet you can fall out of wisdom so easily by making the wrong decisions, by not having the right process, by not having the right knowledge and the experience to bring to bear for that particular situation. And my belief is that generative AI and all the data and all that knowledge can help you exercise better wisdom. And believe me, we're going to need that wisdom, because we're at this precipice now where we're discovering, what can AI do? Is it going to become evil? Is it going to be good? And the reality is, AI is neutral. It's simply a technology. And it's what we do with it as people, and especially as leaders, how we show people the way forward, that's going to determine whether it's being used for good or for evil. And the reality is, right now, we are in a vacuum of leadership when it comes to generative AI. We have this significant gap, and I call this a knowing, doing, leading gap. We know what generative AI is. Not very many of us are doing it, and even fewer are actually leading it. So it's a little hard to see in this audience, how many of you have used something like ChatGPT? Hands up. Okay. How many use it every day to do your job? Hands up really high so people can see. And I want other people to see who these people are, because you should go talk to them. Talk to them during the breaks and the evenings and ask them, how have you changed your leadership? It's interesting. Typically, it was about 15, 20% of people raise their hands. And I had a little bet with someone saying, it's going to be about 20% maximum of the audience that will be using it every day, because consistently, in and out of all the conferences I do, even at the technology AI conferences with chief information officers, it's about 20% of leaders who are actually using these tools have transformed the way they work in a way that is very, very different than what they worked before. And my belief is that until you experience that transformation yourself, you can't begin to lead a transformation that our organizations and our society needs. So we're stuck in this really unique space right now. We're stuck between having FOMO, fear of missing out on all this great technology, and at the same time we have FOGI, fear of getting in. And so you have FOMO and you got FOGI. And we are in this really unique space. So what is driving us? It is this fear. It is this fear of the unknown. And what is it that leaders have to do day in, day out? Well, you have to go chart a course into the unknown. You're a leader because you're creating change. You see that a change needs to happen, and therefore you step into that void to lead that change. And if you're not leading change, that's fine. You're not a leader, you're a manager, maintaining the status quo. And so stepping into that void is a very difficult spot. So I'm going to talk about how you can think about things in a very different way as a leader. How do you overcome that fogey and move into that space where you don't experience the FOMO and you're moving into using it? So there's this great saying. It says that AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI is going to take your job. So you've probably heard this before, and you may think you're a little bit immune from this because you're an executive, you may be the CEO of your organization. But before you get too much of a chip on your shoulder, take a look at these headlines. 2 companies here, Huna Technology is using an AI CEO. A video game technology company called NetDragon WebSpot is also using it. And when they put in their AI CEO, their stock actually started going up. And this is an article from HBR, Harvard Business Review, that's saying using ChatGPT to make better decisions and lays out all the different ways. Again, how are you going to use these tools so that you can do better at your job? It's not about AI taking your job. We're past that conversation. This is about how are you going to use AI to do your job better and to do it in a way that makes sense and aligns with your strategy. So how do you prepare for that? Let me tell you the story of one company. So the CEO said, we're going to be AI ready and AI first. What does that look like? And he said, well, it means that everyone in our organization is going to be trained on how to use AI. And so he said, he called a big company meeting together. It was about 600 people. And he said, we're all going to get trained. You're going to get a list of tools that are approved. And if there's a tool on here that isn't on this list, let me know and we'll investigate it and add it to the list. And we're all going to get trained. And you're going to get a big dashboard with everybody's name on it. And next to the dashboard will be 3 lights colors. So you get a green light if you are actively using these tools. Fantastic. You're AI ready. You get a yellow light if you are trying, but you haven't quite gotten there, but at least you're in the game. And you get a red light if you aren't doing anything. And then he said something very, very drastic. He said, in 6 months' time, there will be no more red lights working at this company. You will either be in a green light or a yellow light stage, or we will have a conversation about why you stood a red light. Is this the right place for you to be? Now, this may seem very drastic, but compare it to having a desktop, being able to use email, using the internet, being able to use collaborative tools like SharePoint or Slack. These are common skills now that we use. And we know those give us an advantage. And AI is in the same spot. So how do you get started? Well, I believe that you have to, in particular, get your top executives involved. And that may be you too as well. And the first step is to create a safe place. And one of my easiest tools that I recommend is ChatGPT for Teams. It's a little step higher than Plus. And it ensures that everything is turned off in terms of training the model with your data. So make sure you go into the privacy settings of ChatGPT and Gemini, Google, and make sure you're not using your data. They're not using your data to train the model. If you use an Anthropic Claude, it's already automatically there. With a big caveat, you still don't want to be just willy-nilly putting up information about your customers and employees in particular, any personally identifiable information. You still want to work with security teams and make sure everything is locked down before you put highly strategic, really sensitive information up there. And then once you have that space, that safe area to be able to experiment, you then train the top 2 levels of your leadership team. And the reason is this. If you want to rely on everyone else to learn how to use these tools, then it's going to stay at that level. It's going to be at the ground level, front lines, very tactical, productivity and efficiency oriented, versus strategic, helping you create a competitive advantage, helping you figure out how you're going to win in the marketplace. You want the people who think about strategy day in, day out to be using these tools so they begin to think about how to use these tools to impact the strategy. And then very importantly, start thinking about prompts as IP. The way that you use prompts inside the organization is highly unique to you. So take your knowledge management people, take your operations people, your marketing and sales ops, customer service ops, make them AI ops. Whatever you can, put it into the process and the knowledge of your organization. And then also, I'm just going to give you a couple quick things because I realize that not everyone has gone through this kind of training, but when you're thinking about prompts, we oftentimes think about prompt engineering. And so this is just a quick example. You want to be able to have this dialogue with the ChatGPT, where it's giving you information about what role it's going to play, instructions, the context, even what the style is going to look like, and be very clear about the output. And I'll give you one other little tip. At the very end of any request, add this little bit. Before you start, ask me any clarifying questions you may have. This is the most powerful tool you can have because instead of thinking about it as one prompt you're going to put in and get the perfect answer out of it, think about it as a conversation. In the same way that we delegate to people, we say, hey, here's a task, here's what we want to get done, and then ask me any questions. Do you have any? And inevitably, they have a few questions. And these tools are going to do the same thing. You'll be amazed what it asks you, things you never thought about. And one of the things I have found extremely helpful, again, I'm writing this book. I'm using various tools. I have uploaded my own writing samples. I have my own GPT built up with all my content in there, in past chapters of the book, my previous books. So it knows me, it understands the context of what I'm writing in. And it can ask me questions in the context of all of that information. And so it's highly contextualized, it's private to me, and it understands how I take feedback. I actually have instructions like, I want you to be very direct, but be kind. This is my baby. So how you work it, how you develop a relationship with these tools is going to become personal to you. So I encourage you, take the time, take the steps to build these. And if you are interested in getting more information about how to build your GPT, I'm going to post up information onto the Slack channel, step by step, on how you can build your own custom GPTs. So how do you stay safe in this environment? How do you build trust? And I have this idea of a Maslow-like hierarchy of needs, of trust to build it. And I call this a pyramid of trust and needs. And at the very bottom, to build the foundation, you have to know you have safety and security. And then you can talk about fairness. And what is fairness? How do we define that? Because we all have different definitions of fairness. And just to give you an idea, do you define fairness as equitable or equity? Two very different ways of thinking how to distribute fairness. And then you think about quality, again, definitions of that. How do you know that the AI is giving you good quality information? And then accountability, if something goes wrong, who's responsible? And then finally, transparency. When will you disclose when AI is being used or not used? So these are the levels of trust. They are also the ways to build governance and regulation and legislation that helps us build a foundation so that we can begin to trust AI to do the work we want it to do. I want to move over now to strategy to talk about this for a second, because I feel like strategy, we oftentimes misunderstand what that looks like. And when I talk to organizations about strategy, like, what's your AI strategy? They usually throw up a chart that looks something else. It looks really bad. Sorry. It's usually all these departments and all the various use cases they can have. They show me a huge list of all the different use cases, hundreds, if not thousands of use cases. I'm like, this is not a strategy. These are all point solutions of how you can use AI. A strategy is very different. A strategy is deciding, it's a choice of a set of integrated choices that explain where you decide to play and how you're going to win. It's the sources of your competitive advantage. And we oftentimes conflate what strategy is versus planning. And we are in the middle of that fall planning season for the next year. And what I oftentimes see organizations doing is planning. They're planning, these are the initiatives we're going to have in AI. We're going to put this plan together for the next 12 months. And I'm like, that is not a strategy. A strategy is about where you are going to play. Where are you going to use AI to give you the biggest advantage? And in particular, what are the ways that you are going to look at AI in a way that it plugs the gap between where your strategy is today and where you want it to be in the future? So let me give you an example of one organization that put together a great strategy. They started in January 2027. It's a call center, about 130,000 people, based and headquartered in Italy, where the CEO is based. And one of the first things they did right off the back is, let's just improve our productivity. And they said, we can go and give these agents all of these tools. And they saw tremendous gains. It decreased the time to process requests by 25 to 30%. They saw quality increase tremendously, with errors decreasing by 85 to 95%. And they also saw training time decrease substantially. They then used that productivity to look at the long, long list of products and innovations and services that they wanted to do for their existing customers and started tackling those. So by mid-2023, they were launching new products and services for their existing customers. And then the third leg of their strategy was to use all these new capabilities and skills to be able to create new marketplaces, new customers they could go after, new audiences they could expand to. That is a strategy. And what they were doing again is, what can AI do to fill these two gaps between where we are and where we want to be? They started identifying all of these gaps, and this is some of the work done by my favorite strategist, Roger Martin, where he goes, you find these gaps and you look at the first gap and you say, if these are the steps that we can take. Okay, great, we have a list of those steps we can take. Now you look at the second gap. What are the options there? Now align them with your first set of options, so they're integrated set of choices. Then look at your next biggest gap and add those to all of your choices. You're not starting from scratch. You're saying, this is our strategy and this is how we can make it happen, and using generative AI to support that. And I believe that you can think about all these different questions, but these are not the questions typically that people talk about when you come to AI. There are things like, how will our customers' needs evolve over time? What are the skills and opportunities we can do in the future that we never imagined we could do? What are the things we've done in the past that are no longer valuable? And very importantly, how will our people have to change to adapt to these needs? Now, when you're pulling together the strategy, I often get asked, who should be involved? Where should this sit? And I encourage you to pull together the smallest team you can have, the minimum viable team, the MVT. And on it should be definitely somebody who understands the strategy, who understands the technology, and it may not be your CIO, thinks about the customer and the product that you have, commercial, and very importantly, HR. Because this in the end is a transformation, and transformations always include people. So you have that team come together, and what you're doing then is putting together all these initiatives, and this is where the planning part comes in. I encourage you to put together a 6-quarter plan, 18 months. Reason why, it transcends that planning period typically of a budget and allows you to think longer term. And the magic about this plan is that every single quarter, you have milestones across the organization for what you want to accomplish. And at the end of the first quarter, you're looking around and saying, where are we? We're taking stock. And we're going to adjust all of the next 5 quarters based on where we actually are. And that includes budget. Where do you need to spend? Where do we need to pull back? What's working? What isn't anymore? So you're making those adjustments for the next 5 quarters, and you're tacking on another quarter. So it's a rolling 18-month plan. The reason why this is so important is that it creates alignment across your entire organization about what is our strategy? How are you using AI up and down throughout the entire organization? And this is how you can tell whether your organization is truly aligned around your strategy. And these are 3 questions that I have used now for over a decade in helping organizations understand how to align around transformation. And these are the 3 questions. First of all, who is your future? Who are you aiming for? What are the needs of your future customer? Can you tell me what they are? Can you even tell me who your future customers are? And the usual response I get is, I can't even tell you who my current customers are. Forget about the future. But who's the future? Who do they look like? What are their needs? And then what is our strategy to be able to meet those needs? And then very importantly, every single person should be able to say, this is what my role is. This is how I am personally driving us forward to fulfill that strategy. John Kennedy, when he was president, made a visit to the Houston Space Center, and he was visiting it. And he tells a story. He ran into a janitor. He was like, hey, it's nice to see you. What are you doing here? And the man said, Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon. And you would hope that every single employee would be able to answer that, to know what the purpose is, what we are trying to accomplish, to be able to know what their role is in making that mission possible. And the reality is that it's very, very messy. I don't know about you, but each day it feels like a new technology, a new advancement, or a new trauma is coming out because of generative AI. And it feels like just whiplash on a constant basis. And the reality is this is what transformation looks like. And so being comfortable, being uncomfortable, being comfortable in the messy, in the liminal space is a very key skill as leaders. Because when you're in that messy space, you know you've left the comfort of where you came from. You haven't arrived yet at the place you want to go to. People are going to be looking to you as leaders to say, where are we going again? Why are we doing this? Why are we on this tough journey? And you have to be that beacon of light to say, this is why we're going on this journey. So our employees are incredibly nervous about this. We see that 72% of employees are nervous about their jobs in the future. And yet they know they need to use these tools because this is the future. And yet they're getting nothing from their organizations or from their leaders about how is my job going to change? How are we going to use AI strategically? How are we going to win in this environment? And when I talk to people who are actually using these tools, the employees who are using this, they get the training, what they feel is this tremendous sense of agency and power. They feel like they have become superhuman. And that leads to a big leadership challenge for us. How are we going to lead in a future where people are superhuman? They can do things now that you never could have imagined. They can go through contracts, create content, do analysis that you used to have to go into the inner sanctum of pointy-headed people to get analysis from. And now you can get it at your fingertips. You feel like you have superhuman powers. So how do we lead them? When we ourselves don't have those powers necessarily, we don't even know how to do the job anymore that they're doing. And this comes back to the core of what leadership is. I believe that leadership is simply a relationship between people who are inspired to create change and people who are inspired to follow them. And again, like any relationship, we don't control them. And yet when I talk to people about what this transformation is going to look like, the number one thing that comes up is, I don't feel in control. I am standing on sand, and I don't know where I fit. I feel very disrupted. And so I like to say this, you have to give up the need to be in control in order to be in command. Because that's the only time when people will begin to trust you, when you say, I don't have all the answers. In fact, I'm going to ask really, really good questions. Because that's the only way we're going to succeed into this space. It's an act of surrender, I believe, in leadership, when you realize that you've worked all this time to get into a leadership role where you can run things and you're not in control. You're not running anything at all. So how do you think about this? How you think about all of these things together was summed up in the previous talk about failure. What's our relationship with failure? Just a show of hands here. Anybody have a really good relationship with failure? Like really good, okay, a couple of hands here. All right, I strongly encourage you to think about that and just say, what is my relationship with failure? Do I avoid it at all costs? Failure is not an option. Do you think about it as something you run towards, you celebrate? I worked with a CEO, and he was like, we tried everything. We knew that we had to have a different attitude. We needed to change our culture. People were just afraid of failing left and right. We weren't risk-taking. And we tried everything. And then we just decided none of it's working, so we just decided to never fail again. I went, how do you do that? And he said he realized that the sense of failure was a sense of shame, that I failed, I personally failed. When they did their best, if you did your best, how can you fail? So they changed the psychology. Whenever anybody started saying or feeling or acting as if they had failed, like, why are you feeling bad? Well, this didn't work out, the project, you didn't hit the budget. He goes, yeah, but we started here. We're here now. We now know how much further we have to go. And that's a data point. We can close the gap. How could that be a failure? Yeah, we didn't hit the goal, but we learned so much more. We're better than here. Aren't we better off than where we are? So why do you feel bad about this? The project didn't work out. The project didn't hit its goal. That's understandable, but we have to look at that with clarity, with wisdom, to be able to understand what's real and what's not. And I believe that the source of having a great relationship with failure is the root of wisdom. Your ability to see things as they are, to reflect on what things had happened, to have equanimity and grace for yourself and for others is the root of how you can actually be strong and be wise. And I think in so many ways, we forget that in our quest for knowledge. And when we realize that knowledge is now in these tools, we can access knowledge anywhere, it frees us to look for ways to be wise, to be able to understand how somebody else would sit. And I firmly, firmly believe that AI is going to make us better humans, but only if we let it. Only if we can accept that it is far from perfect in the same way that we are far from perfect. And it can help us accentuate the things that we want to bring out and our humanness. I'll give you one of the most interesting things I've been studying for the past 15 years, and that's artificial empathy. The reality is these machines are extremely good at being empathetic, or at least appearing to be empathetic. There was a study done with Reddit where they have this subreddit called Ask the Doc. And doctors would go in there and answer questions. And they had AI go and answer some of the same questions. And they took the responses and gave it to a panel and were asked, rate them in terms of accuracy and quality, and also rate them in terms of empathy. And the AI did better on both. And the reason when you diagnose why it was seen as more empathetic, the AI just took more time. It said, I'm so sorry you're having this problem. It must feel awful. I can sense your frustration through your words. Here are some things that you may want to consider. Whereas the doctor was like, I got to get through as many of these as I can, so it just punches out the answer. So when we think about this, the AI can be acting empathetic, but it is not empathetic. At least at this point. It doesn't draw in the experiences that each of us have. And the reality is, we also have empathy, but we also have empathy fatigue. We run out of empathy. We may not have empathy. Every once in a while, I run into somebody who reminds me of my crazy uncle. And I can't get past, this is my crazy uncle talking to me. So it's hard for me to connect with that person and have empathy. So I do believe these tools will help us in the future to have better empathy for others, for ourselves, and to be able to help us communicate and connect in new and better ways that we never could have understood before. It's the translation not of languages, but of the little micro communications to indicate, can you tell this person's aggravated? Can you tell this person's excited? And those things whispering to you in your pocket potentially, in your earpiece in the future, can again help us be better, not only as leaders, but also as humans. All right, I will be around today, and this is my contact information. If you want slides, I'll also put slides back onto Slack as well as some other information. But I just want to leave you with this. This is the future. And we can decide how quickly we step into it or not. And as somebody who has studied disruptive transformations now for over 2 decades, I have seen that the further out into the future you can look, and the further out into the future you will act, the further and faster you will get to that future. So I wish you the best of luck on your journeys. I can promise you it will not be easy. It will be hard. It will sometimes feel treacherous, but I wish you all the best in beginning that journey and continuing on it. Thank you very much.